Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Kerner, for being here. In your testimony, you described the purpose of the Hatch Act as being the separation of the nonpartisan governance of the country from partisan political campaigning, which I think is the best frame to put this in. There may be some who are watching this hearing at home, and they're saying, you know, so what? What's the harm? Can you explain why violations of the Hatch Act, like Kellyanne Conway's, should matter to the public?
Yes, thank you. It's very important. The Hatch Act is really important even today. I know Mr. Meadows talked about how when it was last amended, there was no Twitter. Well, obviously, we've also talked about email and other forms of social media. So, social media and communication. The principles are the same. And the importance of the Hatch Act is that it is very important to have a depoliticized workforce, especially in these times. If you have a workforce where everybody's is campaigning on taxpayer money, that is not a good use of the taxpayer money, and taxpayers have a right to expect that federal workers, while they're in a building, in a federal building, and on duty, are doing the taxpayers' functions rather than electoral functions.
And the law only prohibits political activity when an employee is acting in an official capacity or in the federal workplace, correct?
That's correct.
If the Hatch Act was not in place, could it lead to taxpayers who call the IRS or senior citizens who contact the Medicare hotline being faced with someone on the other end of the phone who is trying to convince them to vote for a particular candidate? That could happen, couldn't it?
Yes, we've had a case like that where someone did call the IRS and the IRS employee showed his support for a presidential candidate.
There's also the danger that allowing federal employees to advocate for political campaigns while on duty would undermine the public's confidence that the government is actually doing its job. Do you agree?
Yes.
Since we're talking about an advisor to the president, I think it would be helpful to put this specifically in the context of the White House. Most people realize that the president is associated with a particular political party, correct?
Yes.
I think most people also understand that the president's most senior advisors are also from the president's political party, typically. Most people want to believe, however, that once the president is in office, he or she will endeavor to act in the best interest of the country and not just a specific political party. In other words, once you enter the office, you're supposed to, in a sense, elevate yourself when you can, and certainly when you're exercising your official duties, to a place of being above partisanship. Senior aides to the president, particularly those who speak on behalf of the White House, are the face of the president and the administration. And you've made that point here today. Do you believe that when Kellyanne Conway uses her official platform as a spokesperson for the White House to criticize President Trump's political opponents, that it may erode public confidence in the presidency itself?
I believe that well, first of all, it's a violation of the law, so she just can't do it for that reason. I don't know if it erodes confidence in the presidency. I think the presidency is viewed as more partisan. I think there's a reason why the president and the vice president are exempt from the Hatch Act. But I do think that when Ms. Conway speaks on behalf of the president or official authority, she's required by law to stay away from those political partisan comments, and I think that's healthy.
One of the purposes of the Hatch Act is also to protect federal employees from being forced into engaging in partisan political work while they're on duty. I understand that Ms. Conway gave her own press interviews and I assume wrote her own tweets. Are you concerned that behavior like Kellyanne Conway's could discourage public servants from coming into government service if they believe their job will be campaigning for the president?
Yes, I am a big believer in the depoliticized federal workforce. I think when people join the federal workforce, they do so out of a commitment to public service, and that should be for all Americans, regardless of political affiliation.
Thank you. I just, as I'm closing, I want to emphasize again that I see this through two lenses. One is absolutely that the Hatch Act is there to protect federal employees. But I think it's also there to enforce the kind of separation from politics and these official offices that people hold, that the country has a right to expect. And it brings credit when you observe those lines to those offices, and it potentially can discredit them when you don't observe the boundary. And the President, I think, must act to protect the integrity of the federal workforce, to police that boundary that I've just spoken of, and for that reason, he needs to fire Kellyanne Conway. I yield back my time.